Good day, everyone. My name is Decarlos Kornegay. Our presentation is titled Surveying the Ransomware Attack Ecosystem and Defenses. In this presentation, we examine ransomware, not just malware, but as a larger ecosystem involving technical operations, business models, payment systems, and defensive strategies. Our research is based on multiple scholarly papers that help us analyze how ransomware is structured, how it operates, and how organizations can better defend against it. To begin, I'll give a quick overview of what we will be covering. To keep the presentation organized, we'll start with a short introduction and explain why ransomware is such an important cybersecurity issue right now. Then we'll show how we classify the literature into three main categories. After that, we'll move into technical details from key papers, followed by the strengths and limitations of the current research, research gaps, and final conclusion. Before we get into research itself, Kentrell is going to define ransomware in its modern form.
Ransomware is a type of malicious software that blocks access to files, systems, or services until a ransom is paid. In the past, ransomware has often described as a simple attack where files were encrypted and a ransom note appeared. But today's ransomware landscape is much broader and more serious. Modern ransomware attacks often include data exfiltration, public leak threats, double extortion, and major operational disruption. That means the damage is not limited to locked files. Victims may also face privacy exposure, downtime, reputational harm, and legal or regulatory consequences. The research also shows that ransomware affects sectors like healthcare, government, businesses, schools, and critical infrastructure. With that broader definition in mind, I'm going to continue into why this topic matters so much. This topic matters because ransomware is one of the most disruptive and costly forms of cybercrime in the current threat landscape. It causes financial losses, service outages, reputational damage, and in some sectors like healthcare, even risks to continuity of care and safety. A major reason ransomware has grown so much is the rise of ransomware as a service, or RAAS. In this model, one group develops and maintains the ransomware platform, while people like ransomware affiliates carry out attacks and share profits. This lowers the barrier to entry for attackers and makes ransomware more scalable. Instead of one actor doing everything, the work is divided between a criminal service model. The papers we reviewed reportedly show that this shift is one of the biggest reasons ransomware is now better understood as an ecosystem problem and not just a malware problem. Now, my friend Decarlos is going to show how we organize the literature.
One of the most important parts of our survey was deciding how to organize the papers. We classified the literature into three major groups. The first class is ecosystem and business model studies. These papers focus on the roles within ransomware operations, how revenue is shared, and how the broader criminal economy supports attacks. The second class is attack lifecycle and operational studies. These papers focus on how ransomware attacks unfold, including access methods, attacker behavior, and stages of compromise. The third is detection, mitigation, and recovery studies. These papers focus on how defenders detect ransomware, reduce risk, and recover after an incident. This approach helps us compare the research in a more meaningful way instead of just summarizing papers one at a time. Kentrell is going to start with the first class.
The first class of papers looks at ransomware as a structured ecosystem. These studies focus on who participates in ransomware operations and how the system functions economically and organizationally. Instead of treating ransomware groups as random hackers, these papers show them as organized systems with defined roles. Some actors develop malware, some gain access to victim systems, some negotiate payments, and others help move or launder funds. Papers like showing the receipts, the Conti internal discussions paper, and ransomware extortion is my business help explain why ransomware has become so scalable and profitable. The big idea is that ransomware succeeds not just because of strong malware, but because of the organized ecosystem behind it. I'm going to make that more concrete with an example case on the next slide. A strong example of this first class is the paper showing the receipts. The paper is important because it gives a clearer picture of ransomware payments than earlier public datasets did. The authors identified nearly $700 million dollars in previously unreported ransomware payments and published an open dataset of more than $900 million dollars in ransomware payments overall. That gives us stronger evidence of how large and organized the ransomware economy really is. The paper also shows that a ransom payment usually involves more than just the attacker and the victim. It can involve negotiators, affiliates, operators, and cryptocurrency exchanges. So the takeaway is that ransomware is not just a technical event. It is also structured financial systems with multiple participants and support roles. Next, Decarlos is going to move us into the second class of papers, which focuses on how ransomware attacks actually unfold.
The second class of papers focus on the ransomware attack lifecycle, meaning how an attack is carried out from beginning to end. These studies show that ransomware is usually not a one-step event. Instead, it is often a multi-stage intrusion. Typical stages include initial access, preparation and consolidation, and then impact, which can include encryption, exfiltration, and extortion. Common attacker methods include phishing, weaker credentials, exposed remote services, privilege escalation, lateral movement, and data theft. These studies are important because they explain why organizations often discover ransomware too late. By the time encryption begins, attackers may already have spent a significant amount of time inside the environment. I'll continue that idea on the next slide by breaking the life cycle down more clearly. This slide shows a simplified ransomware attack life cycle. The first stage is initial access. This can happen through phishing emails, stolen credentials, or exposed services such as RDP or VPN. The second stage is preparation. In this phase, attackers may establish persistence, escalate privileges, move laterally across systems, and identify high-value assets, backup, or administrative accounts. The final stage is impact. This includes encrypting files, stealing data, disrupting operations, and demanding payment. One of the most important lessons from the literature is that encryption is often the last visible step, not the first sign of compromise. That means if a company notices ransomware only when files start getting encrypted, the attackers may already have completed much of the intrusion.
The third class of papers focuses on defense. These studies examine detection methods, mitigation strategies, and recovery approaches used against ransomware. The main defense categories include signature based detection, machine learning, and deep learning methods, behavior based monitoring, network or email filtering, backup and restoration strategies, and more proactive threat led approaches. One of the clearest patterns in this literature is that no single defense is good enough. Some methods are useful for catching known threats, some are better at identifying suspicious behavior, and some others reduce damage or improve your recovery. So instead of one perfect solution, the literature supports a layered defense model that can actually be seen throughout that whole entire process. Decarlos is going to show what that layered defense looks like in practice.
For Class 3, a strong example is the overall structure of ransomware defense itself. One of the biggest lessons from the survey papers is that the ransomware defense has to happen in layers. The first layer is detection. This includes signature-based methods, behavior-based monitoring, and machine learning or deep learning models that try to identify suspicious behavior before the attack fully succeeds. The second layer is mitigation. This includes patching vulnerabilities, strengthening access controls, filtering malicious emails, segmenting networks, and limiting attacker movement once they gain a foothold. The third layer is recovery and resilience. That includes backup, restoration planning, and resilient measures that help organizations recover if the earlier layers fail. And finally, the literature increasingly points toward proactive defense, especially threat-led mitigation and lifecycle aware monitoring. So the main takeaway is that ransomware defense has to work before, during, and after an attack. Kentrell is going to begin our technical detail section.
So, our first technical detail comes from showing the receipts. The problem this paper addresses is that public ransomware payment data is historically or has been historically incomplete. To improve visibility, um, the authors use blockchain based tracing methods to identify likely ransomware payments at a much larger scale. Their method looks at fund flows to known ransomware related addresses and transaction patterns that are consistent with ransom payments. What makes this paper technically strong is that it uses graph based transaction analysis rather than relying only on reported incidents. That gives researchers a better picture on how funds move across the ransomware ecosystem. DeCarlos is going to keep us on the technical section by looking inside a ransomware organization.
The second technical paper analyzes chat logs from Conti ransomware groups. Instead of focusing on malware code, the researchers used natural language processing and LDA topic modeling to study internal communications. They identified five major discussion areas: business, technical work, internal management, malware, and customer service or problem solving. One of the most interesting findings was that most participants were all arounders rather than narrow specialists. That suggests a flexible and structured organization, not just an uncoordinated group of hackers. The broader importance of this paper is that machine learning is being used here to study the internal organization of cybercrime, not just to detect malicious binaries. I'll stay with the next slide and shift from organization to detection methods. The third technical contribution comes from a survey of ransomware detection methods. This paper reviewed 135 papers and selected 45 for deeper analysis. It categorized detection approaches and machine learning based and non-machine learning based methods. What makes this survey valuable is that it goes beyond just listing algorithms. It explains why many methods struggle in practice. Ransomware changes over time, data sets are often limited, and a model that performs well in the lab may not perform well on new or unseen ransomware families. So one of the main lessons from this paper is that high accuracy on a benchmark is not the same as strong real world protection. Kentrell is going to finish the technical session, but the paper focuses on prioritizing defense.
The fourth technical detail comes from a threat led approach to mitigating ransomware attacks. This paper builds a mitigation framework based on attacker tactics, techniques, and procedures, or otherwise known as TTPs. The researchers identify active ransomware groups and map their behaviors to attack techniques and then connect those techniques to specific mitigations. The value of this approach is prioritization. Security teams rarely have unlimited time or resources, so this model helps them focus first on mitigations that address the most important or common attacker behaviors. That makes the paper especially practical because it turns threat analysis into more actionable security planning. I'm going to step back now and look at the overall strengths of the literature. One major strength of the survey literature is that it treats ransomware as a full ecosystem rather than just a malware sample or isolated event. These papers connect attacker behavior, payment flows, labor structure, and defense strategy in a much more complete way. Another strength is the use of stronger empirical methods. Some papers rely on blockchain analysis, others on structured literature reviews, and others on machine learning analysis of leaked internal communications. The literature also does a strong job of creating taxonomies, whether for attack phases, defense approaches, um, or organizational roles. Overall, the field has become more realistic and more systematic in how it studies ransomware. Decarlos is going to follow that with some of the major limitations.
One important limitation is that many defenses are reactive. In many cases, research focuses on detection after suspicious activity has already begun, rather than preventing the attack earlier in the life cycle. Another issue is dataset dependence. Many machine learning based methods rely on narrow or incomplete datasets, which makes it hard to know how well they will generalize to the real world attacks. Some ecosystem studies also depend on leaked or incomplete data, which is still valuable but not fully comprehensive. And in machine learning based research, there's always the challenge of drift and adversarial adaptation. Attackers change their techniques, so defenses that perform well today may weaken over time. I'm going to take that into future directions and where the research needs to go next. The literature points to several important future directions. First, researchers need better proactive defense, especially methods that interrupt ransomware earlier before encryption or sourcing begins. Second, the field needs better real world data sets and reporting so that research is based on stronger and more complete evidence. Third, there is a growing need for stronger defenses against human operated ransomware, where attackers combine credential abuse, remote access exploitation, exfiltration, and extortion. Fourth, future work should better integrate threat intelligence with mitigation planning so organizations can prioritize defenses in a more practical way. And finally, machine learning based defenses need to become more explainable, adaptable, and robust if they are going to be trusted in real environments. Kentrell is going to bring everything together in the conclusion.
To conclude, ransomware has evolved into a professionalized and adaptive cybercriminal ecosystem. Its growth has been driven by ransomware as a service, affiliate relationships, structured payment flows, and increasingly sophisticated multi stage attacks. The paper or the papers we surveyed show that ransomware is not just about encryption. It often involves access abuse, lateral movement, exfiltration, extortion, and operational disruption. The literature also shows that no single defense approach is enough. The most effective approach is layered, threat informed, and lifecycle aware. So, the biggest overall takeaway from our survey is this: understanding ransomware means understanding the full ecosystem behind it and not just the malware itself. DeCarlos is going to close out with the references slide.
This slide lists the main papers used in our presentation. Together, these sources allowed us to examine ransomware from multiple angles, including ecosystem structure, attack operation, detection methods, and future defense strategies. Using papers from different categories helped us build a survey that was more balanced and more complete. And with that, Kentrell will finish with questions.
Thank you for attending and listening, everyone. We appreciate your time and we'd be happy to answer any questions in the comment section below. Have a great day.